Question: would you say that you are a flexible person? Can you be flexible when things change? How about when you have a definite plan and then things are changed for you? Somebody can't be there, somebody's late, things don't work out, it rains when it should be sunny. Are you still a flexible person when things aren't going your way? I struggle a bit. Let's talk more about that today. How are the bends in your road? Sometimes we're moving too fast and they are hard to navigate, and sometimes we don't even see them coming. I hope your bends are smooth and gentle. But no matter how your road bends, I know that God will see us through. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to catch other videos along the way. Welcome back to the Bending Road. Glad you could join me today. Flexibility is an interesting thing because I think most of us would say, oh yeah, I'm flexible. I can bend and shift with things. Until you have a set plan, this is the plan, this is what's been planned for a long time, and then you get to that moment and somebody can't be there, somebody's out sick, somebody is late, you don't have whatever it is you need, and then all of a sudden, I'm not such a flexible person, am I? I try. I will be honest, I really try to be that flexible person, to go with the flow. Okay, we don't have this, that's all right, we'll do that. We don't, we can go move indoors, have a contingency plan if I need to, all of that. And for the most part, I think I do okay on the fly. At a last minute, I'm right ready to get started, and I can shift and change. But when I'm thinking about it, if I take too long to think about it, I can get a bit frustrated and I can struggle a little bit. I have two videos that I looked back and listened to this morning. I don't often listen to my own videos, but I've been thinking about the idea of suffering, and I thought, I know I've talked about this before, and so there are two videos. One was back in 2024 in July, when we were right in that time of not knowing what we were doing and where we were going. We were kind of homeless and unemployed, and we just didn't know. And the real difficulty in that was the unknown. We didn't know what was going to be, what was going to happen. We didn't know where we were going to be. We didn't know if there was going to be a job for us, a home for us, or if we were just going to end up going off to, into early retirement, which would have been really a lot earlier, at that point, a whole lot earlier than we had been planning. I then did another video. That was after I was here. That was in May of 25. So middle of the year, July 2024 was the first one, middle of the year 2025. And now this is April, so I'm kind of shifting back, but this is my suffering thought of 2026, I guess. The 2025 video was really about cooperating with the inevitable. So things are going to happen, troubles are going to come. How do you cooperate into them? How do you steer into the bend? It's kind of like when you're traveling down a snowy road and you hit some ice, you hit something slippery, and you steer into the slide. You steer where you want to go, and hopefully the car is going to catch up with you, right? You don't want to overcorrect. You don't want to drive into the ditch. So you steer into the slide and steer where you want to go. That's interesting because I never really understood what that meant when I was in driver education, when I, was first learning, and they would tell me that, and people would say, oh yeah, this is the way you do it. It never made sense to me. How do you do that? in the midst of a skid. It wasn't until I was actually driving and got into my first skid, into my first slide, the first time I hydroplaned, the first time I hit some icy roads. How do you manage that? How do you maneuver that? And then I learned, right? So when we're dealing with difficult times, when we're dealing with suffering, that's when we learn how to manage it. That's when we learn how to cooperate with the inevitable, how we learn to keep praising God, even though things are really hard, how we learn to be flexible, how we learn to shift on the fly and make things work. And what's interesting is I feel like we're in a day and age where we don't do that anymore. I know one of the big, huge conversations that I had in seminary repeatedly was people who said that suffering had no good purpose and it needed to be eliminated at all cost. And I would think, no, but that's where you learn, right? That's where you grow. That's when you learn how to deal with things. And so I think suffering is important. And I'm actually going to be talking about this a little bit more on Sunday and in light of Easter. But these two past videos, the first one was called When It's Hard, and I'll put a link to that in the notes. The other one is called Handpicked Suffering, and that idea that God knows what you need, and so the suffering is actually handpicked. But today I'm thinking more about the flexibility in suffering. And in Philippians 4, Paul says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. That flexibility, wherever we find ourselves in life, I know I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Now, here's what's interesting about this passage of Scripture. The paragraph markings, the number markings, the chapter markings, and verse markings, although they are very, very helpful to us, they were not part of the original writing. So sometimes I wonder if things would be read a little bit different, if the markings were a little bit different. So in verse 13, he says, I can do all this through him who gives me strength, that flexibility, right? The next paragraph starts with verse 14, and it says, yet it was good of you to share in my troubles. And he goes on and he speaks to the church and how they helped him. And I thought, what if verse 14 wasn't a new paragraph? What if verse 14 actually continued that thought? I can do all this through him who gives me strength, yet it was good of you to share in my troubles. In other words, yes, I know I can do all things through Christ, but it's really good when I have somebody to share with, right? So I think I think that's an important piece to tack on to verse 13. Everybody's memorized verse 13. Everybody knows that. But keep in mind, it is good when we have somebody to share with. When we have troubles, it is good to have somebody to walk alongside with. I am so thankful for my husband who's walking alongside of me in this time when we're trying to be ready to go on the road and we're cleaning things out, and the struggles of all that, and the trying to be flexible. Okay, I don't need this, and I don't need 3 of these. I only need 1 of these, but I don't need this because I can use something else in its place. I can be flexible when we're on the road and we have very little space to deal with. But I have somebody to share in my troubles with all of that, so that's good. But anyway, Paul's point here is that he can be anything he needs to be. He can live with anything he needs to live with because he knows Christ can bring him through. 1 Corinthians 9:19, he says, also, though I am free and belong to no one, I've made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. And he goes on to explain that further in that chapter. I think that's a sign of flexibility in our ministry. And of course, that's what I'm hoping for, that we've kind of built, whether I was ministering in the church in up north or in Binghamton, or when we were in Jamestown, or when we're here, or when we're on the road and we're ministering there, or when I was doing ministry when I was in seminary, wherever we are, we need to not change our ministry, not change the foundation of our beliefs, but maybe change our approach to ministry. Make ourselves all things to everyone so that we can win as many as possible. So we need to know who we're talking to. We need to be flexible in our ministry. Mark 1, also I was looking at this one too. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew, and they were fishermen. And he said, come and follow me, and I'll send you out to fish for people. And it says at once they left their nets and followed him. Okay, that's flexibility. Didn't see that one coming, right? So who knows what ministry plans God has for us or for you? And when God calls and says, go do this, we need to leave what we're doing and go do that. That's that flexibility in ministry. 2 Timothy also says that God gave us a spirit of fear, not a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of self-control, or a strong mind. And whatever we come up against in this life, we can be flexible because we don't need to be afraid. We see the bend in our road. We don't need to fear the bend. Even if it looks like it's bendy and slippery, we don't need to be afraid of that, right? God has given us the strength. God has given us the power. He's given us a strong mind. He's given us the ability to flex and move and bend and be what we need to be in the moment. So I'm wondering, in your struggling these days, I don't know what it is you're struggling with. We have our own here with the moving and the retiring and the packing and all of that, and trying to finish well at the church. I've got things at the church that I still want to accomplish before I go, and praying for the new pastor who's coming in. That's a struggle. That's a trial that folks are dealing with here. And it's a worry for me. I keep thinking, what if I don't find somebody? How long can I stay? Could I fill in and preach some more just until they find somebody? How long can I do that? So all those thoughts are going on. But I also know that there are those of our number who are ill, who are facing illness, who are facing the loss of loved ones. We have a little member of our family. This is a great niece. Who I have not even met yet, who is dealing with cancer, 6 months old. Mom and dad are struggling. They're struggling. This was not in on their bingo card, as they say, right? And how do they flex and bend with that? How do they hang on to God through this? Whatever we're dealing with, I know that God is walking with us. I know that. I know that from experience. I know that from what the scriptures tell us. I know that we can trust God to be with us. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's easy to be flexible. And I want you to know that I'm praying for you. And if there's something specific, you can always connect with me. I want to pray with you. But remember the words of Paul there from Philippians 4. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Yet it is good to have someone to share in our troubles. Don't do this alone. Whatever you're struggling with, find somebody. And if you feel like you can't Maybe you're not in a position where you can share with your spouse. Find somebody safe. Maybe you are a male and your pastor's a female, or vice versa, and you feel like you can't share with your pastor. Find somebody that you can share with. Find somebody that you can trust. I used to depend on my dad all the time, and when I could no longer talk to my dad after he passed away, I struggled. I struggled a lot until I realized, not that I didn't know this before, but I could take the same things to my mom, and I could chat with her, and it was good. I'm also finding that my daughter is a good one to talk to. I have my sister who is a great one to talk to. My husband, of course, for me, it's just amazing to have somebody to share with. If you feel that you don't have anybody you can share with, you let me know. Let me know. We can chat. There's no judgment here. None. It doesn't matter if I know you or don't. Struggles, whatever your struggle is, it's hard. It's hard, but God is with you. Always. It's interesting. I think about suffering. And I think because I've been told so many times that suffering just needs to be eliminated at all costs, and there's no good in suffering. But I just don't believe that. That's not what Scripture tells us. We learn and grow, and we are refined by our struggles. We learn perseverance through our struggles. All of that. It's a growing thing. We learn to depend on God in our suffering. So it's important, and so obviously, I think about this occasionally, and so there you go. You get your third video on suffering. If you didn't see those first two, I would encourage you to go back and check those out. The first one is, I'll tell you, the video and audio is really poor. I will admit that, but that was when we were just in the starts, the difficulty of all that time. And that second one, I found it very profound, even re-listening to myself, and it reminded me of hope in the midst of suffering and embracing that suffering. I hope I've encouraged you today. I hope you have a great weekend or week ahead, depending on when you're listening to this. And I will see you right here next week along the Bending Road. I am so glad we can travel along this Bending Road together. You can connect with me on social media or on my website at bendingroad.weebly.com. I would love to pray for you as you navigate the bends in your road. And when the bends in your road come, do not be afraid. Take the hand of God and keep walking. You are not alone.